Ukraine's Franken BMP, Soviet hull, Spanish turret. Ukraine's 146th Separate Repair and Recovery Regiment posted photos on social media in early June, and those photos showed a Soviet-era BMP infantry fighting vehicle on transport, except this particular BMP was wearing a turret it absolutely did not roll out of a Soviet factory with. Gone was the original conical Soviet turret, and in its place sat something modern, something Spanish, something that looked very much like a Guardian 30 remote weapon station built by Escribano Mechanical and Engineering, a firm out of Madrid that is now apparently in the business of making old Soviet equipment feel confused about its own identity. The vehicle is technically a Soviet BMP. It is operationally something else entirely. Let's call it the Franken BMP. No, that doesn't really roll off the tongue. How about El Guardian Rojo, the Red Guardian? No. Don BMPote, after Don Quixote. No? Wait, I got it. El Sovietico Picante, the Spicy Soviet. That works. Let's go with that. Hey friends, I'm Wes O'Donnell, defense journalist, Army infantry veteran, Air Force veteran. If you're new here, welcome to my channel, and if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. You are looking amazing today. I hope someone has told you that. First, the context. Ukraine has a lot of BMPs. The BMP is a Soviet-designed track infantry fighting vehicle that's been hauling troops into and out of trouble since the 1960s. Ukraine inherited a large fleet when the Soviet Union collapsed, and it's been keeping them in service ever since because it can't afford not to. So here's what you're working with. The BMP-1 weighs about 13 tons, hits 65 kilometers per hour on roads, swims at about 8 kilometers per hour in water, carries a crew of 3 and 8 dismounts in the back, and is armed with a 73mm low-pressure gun. Oh, and an antique missile system that modern armies regard the way you regard a flip phone at a hackathon. The BMP-2 is better, with a 30mm cannon that still has some life in it, but it's paired with dated Soviet optics and a manned turret that requires a crewman to sit up in the part of the vehicle most likely to get turned into an instant easy-bake oven. Neither version was designed for a battlefield where cheap drones with thermal cameras are orbiting at 400 feet, and FPV operators are watching for anyone who pokes above the armor line. And yet, Ukraine can't retire these vehicles. A tracked armored box that can move infantry under fire is always useful, even an old one. Troops need to reach positions, wounded need to come out, assaults need to direct fire support, defensive lines need armored reinforcement. The war consumes armored vehicles at a brutal rate. Between mines, FPV drones, artillery, anti-tank missiles, and Lancets, Ukraine needs volume, and volume means keeping the old hardware in the fight. So the question becomes, how do you make a 1960s design relevant in 2026 without waiting years for Western factories to deliver a new fleet? Well, you give it new eyes and sharper teeth. The most important word in remote weapon station is the first one. Remote means the gunner operates the turret from inside the protected hull. No one has to sit exposed in a manned turret, no head above the armor line, no shoulders presenting a target for a drone operator who's been watching the vehicle for 3 minutes. On the original BMP, manning the gun meant putting a human being in the most exposed position on the vehicle. In an era when the sky is full of things that specifically want to find and kill exactly that person, keeping the gunner inside the hull while the turret does the shooting is a genuine survival upgrade before you fire a single round. Now, the weapons package. The Guardian 30 can mount the 30mm Mark 44 Bushmaster II autocannon, which is a NATO standard weapon with a good reputation and a long track record. It also carries a 7.62mm coaxial machine gun, 12 smoke grenade launchers, and an optional 2-tube anti-tank missile launcher, depending on configuration. That's a serious firepower package sitting on what is, structurally, a fairly humble chassis. But the gun still isn't the most important part. The brain is. The Guardian 30 brings dual electro-optical sensors, day-night thermal capability, automatic target tracking, dual-axis stabilization, and a ballistic computer. The vehicle can now detect targets in complete darkness, lock them automatically, calculate a firing solution on the move, and hit what it's aiming at with a first-shot accuracy that the original BMP gunner can only dream about, while squinting through Soviet optics designed when the Beatles were still together. Against the targets a BMP actually engages, infantry in trenches, tree lines, firing positions, light vehicles, logistics trucks, this is a combat-relevant improvement. It gives the vehicle more responsive direct fire support than a heavy machine gun without burning anti-tank missiles on soft targets, in poor visibility, at night, in a fast-moving assault, or in a hasty defense. Those sensors and that ballistic computer are the difference between suppressing a position and guessing at it. And I want to stay on the remote turret point for just another minute, because this is one of those upgrades that sounds like a spec sheet checkbox until you think about it from inside the vehicle. Not that BMPs are the most comfortable ride, but as an infantryman, I spent time around armored vehicles, and the single consistent anxiety around any manned weapon station in a high observation environment isn't the gun, it's the person operating it. A good vehicle can survive a lot. The exposed crewmen above the armor have made this problem catastrophically worse, because now the observation that finds the exposed gunner is cheap, persistent, and everywhere at once. The era of the manned turret on a light vehicle in a drone-saturated environment is over. The question is whether you've updated the vehicle to reflect that reality. The Guardian 30 answers yes. For a BMP crew, that's not a minor improvement. That's the difference between a vehicle that keeps a trained soldier alive and one that buries them. And here's the part that should make every Ukrainian logistics officer smile. The Guardian 30 can be configured with the NATO Mark 44 Bushmaster, as I mentioned, or it can mount the Soviet 30mm 2A42 cannon. Now, the 2A42 is the same gun fitted to the BMP-2 and several other Soviet-origin vehicles throughout Ukraine's fleet. Ukrainian crews are already trained on it, maintenance units know how to fix it, depots already stock its ammunition. Ukraine doesn't have to stand up a new supply chain for a weapon the country has been running for decades. So the choice is, fit the Mark 44 and take a long-term step toward NATO standard armament, which requires building a separate ammunition and support pipeline, or fit the 2A42 and get fully modern remote operation, fully modern sensors, and a fully modern fire control system wrapped around a gun your supply chain already knows and loves. For a country managing a chaotic mixed fleet of Soviet BMPs, captured Russian vehicles, donated Western IFVs, and locally modified machines, that second option is a logistics dream. Sometimes the smartest move is to put Western brains on the gun your army already knows how to maintain. Now, the skeptic in me always has to have an appropriate caveat. Ukrainian authorities haven't officially confirmed the turret identification. I'm just telling you what we've spotted from photos uploaded by Ukraine themselves. The vehicle appears to have been photographed during transport, not mid-firefight. So we're looking at an integration that's at least partially complete, but whose operational status is unclear. The photo is the first public evidence that a Guardian 30 has been installed on a BMP, not confirmed evidence that it's fighting. That's my point. We don't know how many vehicles have received this upgrade. One photo is a data point, not a whole program. One photo of one prototype is very interesting. What would make this a real story at scale is the May 2025 meeting that preceded it. Ukraine's Ministry for Strategic Industries met with the Spanish company EM&E in May of 2025 to discuss localizing the production and servicing of Guardian 30 systems inside Ukraine. Minister Herman Smetanin talked openly about steps toward a real cooperation, not just equipment delivery. That conversation matters more than the photograph. If Ukraine can locally produce, integrate, or even service these turrets domestically, then the Guardian 30 stops being an oddity and becomes a scalable modernization pathway. Picture the loop. A damaged BMP comes off the front, goes to a repair regiment like the 146, gets stripped of its obsolete turret, receives a locally serviced Guardian 30, and goes back out to the front as a meaningfully more capable vehicle. Repeat that across a large fleet. That's an industrial process for regenerating mechanized combat power faster and cheaper than buying new. For Spain and the broader European defense industry, it's a model of wartime cooperation that goes beyond shipping equipment and waving goodbye. Sustainment, integration, and possibly local manufacturing is the kind of partnership that actually lasts and that builds Ukrainian industrial capacity rather than just Ukrainian dependence. Because the story isn't really about one BMP. New production from Western factories is real but slow. Captured Russian equipment is useful but unpredictable. The domestic repair and regeneration loop, taking old vehicles, upgrading them quickly and cheaply, and returning them to the field, is one of the most underappreciated edges Ukraine has maintained throughout this war. The Guardian 30 integration, if it scales, is that loop applied to Ukraine's largest legacy fleet. Not the most glamorous answer, the most scalable one. El Sovietico Picante is not a Bradley. It's not a CV-90 or a Martyr or a Lynx. The turret upgrade does nothing for the hull, and the hull is the part that gets killed. The BMP is lightly armored, and no amount of clever Spanish optics changes the fact that a mine or an FPV drone or a well-aimed anti-tank guided missile or artillery can still end the vehicle and everyone inside of it. Even with the Guardian 30, this is an old chassis with better eyes and better guns, not a frontline breakthrough vehicle, but better eyes and better guns on a fleet of vehicles you already own, regenerated quickly, cheaply, and locally, is exactly the kind of unglamorous math that wins long wars. Russia keeps betting it can grind down Ukraine's armored fleet faster than Ukraine can replace it. Well, stories like this one are how Ukraine keeps proving that bet wrong. Take the old Soviet box, strip the obsolete parts, add the Western brains, keep the gun that the supply chain already loves, send it back to work. Congratulations, El Sovietico Picante. You are NATO-ish now. That's it for today, my friends. If you want to keep following how Ukraine's hybrid modernization program develops, hit subscribe. It is the best free way to support this channel. I'm tracking the broader story of European industry, building real wartime partnerships, and there's more coming. Membership is about $3 a month. It keeps the analysis running, and the longer reads are over on Substack. I'm at westodonnell.com over there. And as always, glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Crimea is Ukraine.